The box had been in my mother's crawl space for 26 years, and I only found it because a raccoon died in the ductwork. I want to be clear about that from the start, because everything that happened after depends on how ordinary the beginning was. There was no premonition. There was no strange feeling in my chest when I pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in, the little grey ranch on Delmore Street, with the sagging gutter my father never fixed, and the maple that had swallowed half the front walk. My mother had been dead 4 months. I was there to empty the place so we could sell it, because my sister lives in Oregon and I live 40 minutes away in Columbus, and 40 minutes made me the one who dealt with things. The smell hit me the second I opened the front door, sweet and rotten and thick, the kind of smell that gets into your clothes. I called an HVAC guy named Rick, who showed up in a van with a cartoon furnace painted on the side, and he crawled around in the ceiling for an hour before he came down holding a garbage bag at arm's length and told me I had a dead raccoon, a family of live ones nesting near the vent, and a crawlspace access panel in the hall closet that somebody had drywalled over a long time ago, looks like. That last part stuck with me, not because it was sinister, because I didn't remember it. I grew up in that house. I hid in that hall closet during thunderstorms until I was 9 years old, sitting on top of the shoe rack with the door cracked so I could see the light. There had never been a panel in there. Or if there had, I'd forgotten, and I have always trusted my memory more than most people trust theirs. It's a point of pride, honestly. I remember phone numbers from grade school. I remember what my father was wearing the day he left. So when Rick cut through the drywall and found a hollow behind it, I asked to see. He shrugged and stepped back, and I got down on my knees and shined my phone light into a space maybe 2 feet deep, running along the crawlspace ledge. And there was the box, a cardboard liquor box, the flaps folded over each other in that interlocking way, soft with age. The printing faded to ghosts. Somebody had put it there and then sealed the wall in front of it. I told myself there were 100 reasons to seal a wall. Water damage, a remodel that got abandoned. My father had done a lot of half projects before he left. That was 1998, when I was 11. The math worked. A man walls up a closet and then walks out on his family and never explains himself. That's not a mystery. That's just a divorce. I took the box home. I want you to understand the kind of person I was that week, because I'm not that person anymore, and I miss him. I'm a claims adjuster. I spend my days looking at photographs of car accidents and water-damaged basements and deciding what's true. My whole career is the belief that if you gather enough facts, the picture resolves. A dent has a cause, a stain has a source. People lie, but evidence doesn't. And if the evidence seems to lie, it only means you haven't found enough of it yet. I believed that the way other people believe in God, the box held the usual sediment of a childhood. Report cards, a macaroni ornament, a ziplock of baby teeth that made me feel strange, the way baby teeth always do. A stack of Polaroids and drugstore prints, held together with a rubber band that had melted into the top photo, and at the bottom, wrapped in a dish towel, a VHS tape. No case, just the tape, and a strip of masking tape across the spine, with my mother's handwriting on it. She had a distinctive hand, all the loops leaning hard to the right like they were running from something. It said, Danny, backyard, summer 94. Danny is me, Daniel Ray. I was 7 in the summer of 1994. I felt a genuine warmth looking at it, and I want that on the record too, because of what came later. My mother filmed everything for about 2 years in the mid-90s, after my grandfather died and left her a camcorder. She'd narrate our lives in this bright, slightly manic voice. There are tapes of me opening Christmas presents, me at the community pool, me losing a tooth on camera, and crying about the blood. I thought I'd seen all of them. I thought I remembered all of them, which for me is the same thing. I didn't own a VCR. Nobody does. But I remembered. There it is again, that pride, that my mother's old console TV with the built-in VCR was still in her bedroom, too heavy to bother moving, waiting for the estate sale. So the next evening I drove back to Delmore Street, and I sat on the edge of my dead mother's bed in the dark, and I pushed the tape in, and the machine took it with that specific mechanical swallow I hadn't heard in 20 years. The screen filled with blue, then snow, Then the backyard. It was our backyard, no question. The chain-link fence. The above-ground pool with the flaking blue liner. The swing set. My father assembled the wrong way, so the whole thing rocked when you went too high. The picture had that soft, overexposed quality of old video. Everything a little too bright at the edges. Greens gone, almost white, where the sun hit. My mother's voice came from behind the camera, exactly as I remembered it, warm and quick. "Okay, go ahead, honey. Show me what you learned." And a kid ran into frame. He was maybe 7, skinny, in red shorts and no shirt, with a mop of dark hair. He ran to the center of the yard and did a clumsy cartwheel, landing on his backside, and laughed. My mother laughed too and said, "That's my boy." The problem is that the kid wasn't me. I don't mean he looked a little different than I remembered. I don't mean the video was blurry, or the angle was strange, or that 7-year-olds all look alike. I mean I have seen approximately 400 photographs of myself at that age. I was a fat kid. I had white blonde hair until I was 10. Hair so light my classmates called me Q-tip. I was terrified of cartwheels and every other activity that involved my feet leaving the ground, a fear I never fully lost. The child in the video was lean and dark-haired and fearless, and my mother was pointing a camera at him and calling him honey and calling him her boy, and the masking tape on the spine said Danny. I watched the whole thing. 11 minutes. The dark-haired boy jumped off the swing. He did a handstand against the fence. He splashed in the pool. My mother's voice, unmistakably my mother, narrated all of it with the easy love of a parent filming her only son. At one point she said, "Danny, come here. Let me see that scrape." And the boy ran to the camera and held up his elbow, and she said, "Oh, you're so brave." And the tape cut to snow. I sat there in the dark for a long time. My first thought, my adjuster's thought, was contamination. Tapes get mislabeled. My mother had a dozen of them. She'd filmed the neighborhood kids sometimes, cousins, the children of her friends. This was some other Danny, some other boy, and my mother had used a wrong strip of tape or written the wrong name in a hurry. That was the logical explanation, and I gripped it like a railing. Except she called him her boy. Except she called him to her to look at his scrape, the way you do with your own child and no one else's. Except that was our yard, our pool, our crooked swing set, and I had a cousin named Kevin, and a cousin named Sarah, and no relative on earth named Danny, except me. I took the tape out and looked at the label again, under my phone light. My mother's handwriting, no mistaking it. Danny, backyard, summer '94. I drove home with the tape on the passenger seat like it might get up and leave. I didn't sleep. Around 2 in the morning I got up and dug the melted rubber band off the stack of photos I'd taken from the box, working it loose with a butter knife. And I went through them one at a time under the kitchen light, looking for the dark-haired boy, because if he was real, if he'd been in our yard, he'd be in the pictures too. Some friend, some cousin's kid. There'd be an explanation with a face. He wasn't in any of them. But that wasn't what made me put the photos down and sit very still. It was that I wasn't in them either. I went through the whole stack twice. 31 photographs, all from the mid-90s by the look of them. The fashions and the film grain. My mother was in some. My father was in a few, younger than I could really remember him, with that mustache, the house, the yard, a birthday cake, and in the pictures where a child should have been, blowing out candles, sitting on Santa's lap, held up to the camera as a baby, there was a child, dark hair, a face I did not recognize. In every single one, 31 photographs of my childhood, and I was not in a single one. I told myself, out loud, in my empty kitchen, that there was a logical explanation. I said it like a prayer to a God I was starting to doubt. The next morning I called my sister. Rachel is 4 years older than me. She actually remembers the 90s, the parts I only remember through the tapes. I hadn't told her about the box yet. I hadn't wanted to bother her. She'd taken Mum's death hard, and from a distance, which is its own kind of hard. "Do you remember a kid named Danny?" I asked. "Somebody who used to come over when we were little. Dark hair, skinny, around my age." There was a pause. "Danny's you," she said. "I mean another Danny. A friend, a cousin, somebody Mum filmed." Longer pause. Daniel, are you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine. I found some old tapes when I was clearing out the house. Some old pictures. I'm trying to figure out who's in them. I kept my voice level, professional, the voice I use on the phone with people whose houses have burned down. There's a kid in Mum's home videos who I don't recognize. And in the photos too. Send me one, she said. I photographed the birthday cake picture and texted it to her. The dark-haired boy, mid-blow, cheeks puffed, a paper crown slipping down his forehead. Behind him, my mother, younger, laughing, and on the cake in blue frosting the word Danny and the number 7. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared for almost a full minute. Then she called me back, and her voice had changed. It had gone careful. Where did you get this? The crawl space. Behind the hall closet. Somebody drywalled over an access panel and put a box behind it. Ratch, who is that kid? That's your 7th birthday, she said slowly. I remember your 7th birthday. You wore that crown all day. You wouldn't take it off. You even slept in it. That's not me. Danny. Her voice cracked on my name. That's you. I'd know you anywhere. That's my little brother. I looked at the photo on my screen, at the confident, dark-haired stranger, and I looked at the mirror across the kitchen, where a pale, heavy-set man with thinning, sandy hair looked back. A man who was allegedly that boy grown up, and something in me refused. Some deep instrument that measures whether things are true swung hard against it and stayed there. Send me a picture of yourself right now, I said. What? Just do it, please. She sent a selfie, annoyed, in her kitchen in Oregon. My sister, 43, grey coming in at her temples, her father's chin, our father's chin. She looked like our family. She looked like the woman in the old photos, aged up. I could draw the line from the girl in the birthday picture, who was standing beside the dark-haired boy, to the woman in the selfie. The resemblance was obvious. There was no line I could draw from that boy to me. Do I look like our parents? I asked her. You look like Mum's side, she said. And then, gentler, Danny, you're scaring me. What is this about? I told her I'd call her back. I didn't. Not for 2 days. Here is what a rational man does. And I was still, then, a rational man. He does not conclude that his sister and his dead mother conspired to insert a fake child into the family record. He does not conclude that the tape is haunted. He looks for the boring truth, and the boring truth about a face you don't recognize is usually adoption, or a secret, or a resemblance you've simply lost the ability to see. So I made a list of the things I could actually check. Documents, records, the paper skeleton that every American life hangs on. I would find myself in the record, and the boy would resolve into whoever he really was, and my strange refusal would turn out to be grief doing weird things to a tired brain. I started with my birth certificate. I keep my important papers in a fireproof box, because I'm the kind of person who has a fireproof box. Daniel James Ray, born March 3, 1987, Franklin County, Ohio. Mother, Carol Ann Ray. Father, Thomas Ray. It was all correct. It was exactly what I expected, and I felt the first real relief since I'd pushed that tape into the machine. Here was paper. Here was the state of Ohio agreeing that I existed and always had. Then I looked closer, the way I look at a water damage claim when the story's a little too clean. The certificate was a certified copy, issued in 1998. I remembered why. My mother had gotten new copies for all of us around then. Some bureaucratic thing, right around the time my father left. The paper was right, the seal was right, but the certificate number, that long string in the corner, had been my whole life a thing I never looked at. I looked at it now, and then I did the thing that broke everything open, which was so simple, I'm almost embarrassed. I dug out Rachel's birth certificate, which had been in Mum's papers, in the box from the crawl space. Rachel Marie Ray, born 1983, same county, same issuing office. Rachel's certificate number and mine were 4 digits apart. 4 digits. Born 4 years apart, in a county that issues tens of thousands of birth records a year. 2 certificates issued in sequence, near consecutive numbers, on documents dated 1987 and 1983. That's not how it works. I've looked at 10,000 documents, sequential numbers on records that should be years apart in the filing system means they were created at the same time, both of them. In 1998, I want to be honest about the exact texture of that moment, because I've relived it so many times it's worn smooth. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was vertigo. The specific vertigo of a professional recognizing a forgery, because that's what I do. I catch fabricated evidence. And I was looking at my own birth certificate, the way I look at a claim from a man who set his own garage on fire. I called the county records office the next morning. I gave them my information, my case, the tone of a man who works with records all day, which I am. The clerk was helpful. She pulled the digital file, and she told me, cheerfully, that there was a note in the system. My original birth record had been amended in September 1998, and the physical original was archived off-site, available by request with a form and a 2-week wait. Amended how? I asked. It doesn't say the reason on my end, she said. Amendments happen for all kinds of things. Adoption, correction of errors, legitimation, name changes. She paused. If you were adopted, sir, sometimes the original certificate is sealed. You'd have to petition. I hung up and sat in my car in the parking lot of my own office for an hour. Adoption. That was it. That had to be it. It fit everything, or almost everything. I was adopted, quietly, the way people did in the 80s, and the boy in the tape was the biological child my parents had before me. Or, no, the tape was labeled Danny, and I was Danny. My name, my birthday cake. But an adopted child can be given the family name, given a birthday party, filmed and loved. Maybe the dark-haired boy was me, before, and I simply couldn't recognize my own pre-memory face, because I'd been changed by whatever happened, whatever made them wall up a box and forge fresh certificates and never speak of it. It almost held together. It was almost a shape I could live inside. Except Rachel remembered that day. She remembered me in the paper crown. She remembered the dark-haired boy as her brother, as me, with total conviction. If I'd been adopted at 7, she'd have known. She'd have remembered a before and an after. She didn't. In her memory there was only one continuous Danny, and he had dark hair and did cartwheels, and he'd grown into me, and she saw no contradiction at all. 2 people had watched the same tape. My sister saw her brother, I saw a stranger, and we were both certain. I requested the archived original certificate that afternoon. Then I drove to the library. The Grove City branch has a local history room and a microfilm reader that a volunteer named Marjorie showed me how to use, with the patience of someone who has all the time in the world. I told her I was researching my family, which was true, and she lit up, because that's what the room is for. I asked for the local paper, the Southwest Messenger, from 1994 and 1998. The 2 years that mattered. I didn't know yet what I was looking for. I just knew that when a family seals a box in a wall and forges the paperwork of a child, something happened, and things that happen get written down. I found it faster than I should have. July 1994. A short article, 3 columns, the kind of thing that runs on page 4. A boy named Daniel Ray, age 7, of Delmore Street, had gone missing from his backyard on a Saturday afternoon in July. There was a photo. It was the dark-haired boy. It was the boy from the tape, the birthday boy. Unmistakable. Grinning in a school picture with a chipped front tooth. The article quoted my mother, Carol Ray, pleading for information. It described what he'd been wearing. Red shorts. He'd been wearing red shorts in the tape. She'd filmed him doing cartwheels in the yard, and then, sometime that same summer, in those same red shorts, he had walked out of that yard and never come back. I sat in front of the microfilm reader, and my hands were not steady, because the boy in the tape was real. He'd had a name, my name, and he'd been in the newspaper, and he was gone. But I was also real. I was sitting in the library, 39 years old, a claims adjuster, with a fireproof box, a man who had lived a whole life as Daniel Ray. 2 Daniel Rays. One who vanished in 1994 at age 7, and one who was born in 1987 and would have been 7 in 1994. The dates didn't leave room for both of us. If the vanished boy was 7 in 1994, He was born in 1987. He was born the same year I was. He had my birthday. He had my name. He had my family, my yard, my mother's voice calling him honey. He had my whole life, up until the summer I was 7. And then he was gone, and I was still here. I scrolled forward through the film with the crank, my jaw tight. I needed the follow-up. Missing children get follow-ups. A body, an arrest, a recovery, something. I needed the resolution because I am a man who needs resolution. I went through August, September, nothing. The story simply stopped, the way local stories do, absorbed into the general silence of a town that has decided not to talk about a thing. But there was one more piece, in late September 1994. Not an article, a notice, a small paid announcement in the community section, the Kind Family's place. It thanked the community for their support during our recent difficult time and asked for privacy. It was signed by Thomas and Carol Ray. And below it, almost as an afterthought, in the tiny type of the paper's records column that ran births and deaths and marriages, there was a birth listed. To Thomas and Carol Ray, a son, September 1994, not 1987, 1994. I had been born in 1987. My certificate said 1987, the forged one, the amended one. But the town paper, printed at the time, uncontaminated, had recorded a Ray son born in September of 1994, 2 months after the other boy vanished. I made Marjorie print me copies of everything, and my voice sounded strange asking, and she looked at me with a flicker of concern, and then chose, kindly, to pretend she hadn't. I paid my dimes for the copies. I drove home, and in my apartment I laid the pages out on the floor, the birth notice, and the missing child article, and my 2 forged certificates, and I made myself think it through, the way I'd think through any file, no matter how much I didn't want to. There had been a boy named Danny, born 1987. He vanished in the summer of 1994, at 7 years old. 2 months later, a Ray son was born, a baby, and that baby had been raised as Danny, given the vanished boy's name. And in 1998, when that baby was 4 years old, someone had gone to the county and amended the record, changed the birth year from 1994 to 1987, so that the new son and the old one became a single seamless child, one continuous Daniel, born 1987, 7 at the pool, 7 with the crown. They had erased the seam. They had made 2 boys into 1 boy on paper, so that no one would ever have to explain the summer in between. That baby was me. I don't have words for what that felt like, so I'll just tell you what I did, which was nothing, for a very long time. I sat on my floor, because if I was the baby born in September 1994, then I was not 7 at the pool. I was not born in 1987. My whole childhood before 4 years old was borrowed from a dead boy, or a lost boy, stitched onto me like a graft. The report cards, the baby teeth, the teeth, whose teeth were in that Ziploc bag. I was not adopted. It was so much stranger than adopted. My parents had lost a son, and then they had had another one, and then they had spent the rest of their lives insisting he was the same son. And my sister, Rachel, who was 11 when the first Danny vanished, and old enough to remember everything. My sister had swallowed the story so completely that she remembered me in the paper crown. She remembered a birthday I could not have attended because I did not yet exist. I understood then why the box was in the wall. It wasn't hiding a crime. It was hiding a grief so total it had rewritten reality. My mother had walled up the evidence of the first Danny because she could not bear to destroy it and could not bear to see it, and she had raised me, the second Danny, as though the wall didn't exist, as though there had only ever been 1 boy in that yard. That was the logical explanation. It was monstrous, and it was sad, and it was, for about a day and a half, enough. Then I found the second tape. I'd gone back to the house to keep clearing it, because the estate sale was in 2 weeks, and grief doesn't pause the calendar. And I couldn't stop thinking about the crawl space hollow, the sealed panel, the deliberateness of it. Rick had cut through the drywall and pulled out the box, but I hadn't looked past it. I hadn't looked at the rest of the hollow. So I got a flashlight, and crawled halfway into the wall, into that 2-foot space along the ledge, and I ran the light along it, and back in the corner, where the ledge met the crawl space proper, there was something else, a shoebox, sealed with layers of packing tape gone amber and brittle. Inside were cassette tapes, audio cassettes, a dozen of them, each labeled in my father's handwriting, which I knew from the backs of old photographs, and from exactly one letter he'd sent me when I was 15, and had thrown away and regretted. The labels were dates, 1995, 1996, 1997, and a small handheld recorder, the old kind, with corroded batteries I had to pry out. My father left in 1998. He walled up the first box, I'd assumed, and left. But these cassettes ran right up until the year he left, hidden in the same wall, and they were in his hand, and I realized I had never actually asked why my father left. I'd been 11, or, no, I'd been 4, God. In 1998 I was 4 years old. My whole memory of my father leaving was another graft, another borrowed thing. Because a 4-year-old doesn't remember a divorce as a specific dated event with a man in specific clothes. I remembered him leaving, the way the first Danny would have. I'd been carrying a dead boy's memories and calling them mine. I bought a cassette player at a pawn shop that afternoon. I couldn't wait. I sat in the car in the pawn shop lot and put in the earliest tape, 1995, and pressed play. My father's voice. Younger, tired, low, like a man talking to himself in a room where he's afraid of being heard. It's March. He's 6 months old now. A long pause. Tape hiss. Carol calls him Danny. I can't. I've tried. I hold him, and I can't make the name come out. Another pause. He looks at me. 6 months old, and he looks at me like he knows something. I know that sounds crazy. I know how it sounds. I gripped the wheel. This was grief. This was just a father drowning in grief, unable to name his new son after his lost one. That was all. That was human and terrible and normal. I fast-forwarded. Stopped at random. 1996 now, by the label. Found him in the yard again. At the fence. In the corner by the maple, the exact spot. He's not even 2, he can barely walk, and he crawls to that exact spot in the fence, and he stands there, and he touches the wire. Carol says, all kids have a favorite spot, but he doesn't go anywhere else. Just there, where Danny was standing, the last place anybody saw him. The camera was pointing right at that spot the last time I filmed him. The reel, the tape cut. My father had stopped himself. I sat very still. The last place anybody saw the first Danny was the corner of the yard by the maple, at the fence, and the second Danny, me, a toddler who couldn't have known, had crawled to that spot and stood there touching the wire. That's the kind of thing a grieving man would notice and magnify. That's confirmation bias. That's a father seeing ghosts in coincidence because he needs the lost boy to still be there somehow, even in his replacement. I knew all of that. I recited all of that to myself in the pawn shop parking lot. I put in the next tape, 1997. He talked about the man again today. My father's voice had changed over the tapes. Thinner, sanded down. He's 3, he said. The man by the fence took me for a while, and then he brought me back different, word for word. I wrote it down. Carol got angry. She said I'm putting ideas in his head. She said stop asking him questions. A shaking breath. I'm not asking him anything. He just says these things. He said the man had a face like the fence. I don't know what that means. A face like the fence. I turned the tape off. My hands were cold, because here is the thing I hadn't told anyone. The thing I'd never told anyone. A thing I'd assumed was a normal childhood nightmare, and never once examined. For as long as I can remember, I have had the same recurring dream. It comes maybe twice a year, less now than when I was young. In it I am standing at a fence, chain link, and on the other side of it there is a person, and I can't see the person's face because the face is made of the fence, the diamonds of wire where features should be, and the person is very patient, and the person is waiting for me to come through. I always wake up before I do. I've had that dream my whole life. I told a therapist about it once in my 20s, and she said dreams about fences are usually about boundaries, transitions, and I'd nodded, because that made sense. and I'd never thought about it again. A face like the fence. The second Danny, me, had said that at 3 years old, and I was still dreaming it at 39. And the first Danny had vanished at that fence. There were more tapes. I couldn't listen to them in the car anymore. I drove home and I didn't sleep, and I told myself, over and over, that a father can suggest a nightmare to a child, that children absorb the fears of their parents, that my dream was inherited the way you inherit an accent, passed from my father's obsession into my 3-year-old mind, and lodged there for life. That was the logical explanation. It required no man with a wire face. It required only a broken family and a suggestible child. It was almost enough. The next morning, the archived birth certificate arrived. My true original, the one from before the 1998 amendment. I opened it standing at my mailbox. Daniel James Ray. Born September 14, 1994. Franklin County, Ohio. Mother, Carol Ann Ray. Father, Thomas Ray. There it was in the state's own hand. I had not been born in 1987. The 1987 certificate was the forgery. This was the truth, sealed away, and now unsealed. I was the second son, born 2 months after the first one vanished, given his name. But the certificate had one more line I wasn't ready for, a line the amended version had scrubbed, under a field I'd never paid attention to on any birth record, a field for multiple births. There was a mark, and a notation, in the cramped hand of a 1994 records clerk, twin, sibling deceased. I read it 4 times. I called the county again. I was not calm this time, and I heard it in my own voice, and I didn't care. I asked the clerk what that notation meant. She pulled the file. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, carefully, that the original record indicated a twin birth, and that the other twin had been recorded as stillborn. September 14th, 1994. 2 boys. One lived. One didn't. But the amendment in 1998, she said, reading, removed the multiple birth notation entirely. Someone requested the record be corrected to a single birth, and the year was changed. A pause. That's unusual, sir. I'll be honest. I've been doing this a long time, and I've never seen a birth year amended by that much without a court order attached. And I don't see a court order in this file. I just see a request form, signed by the parents. I thanked her, and hung up and sat down on my kitchen floor for the second time in a week. 2 boys born in September 1994. One lived, me. One was stillborn. And a third boy, the first Danny, born 1987, had vanished 2 months before we were born. 3 boys. And by the time the paperwork was rewritten in 1998, all 3 had been folded into a single child, born 1987, alive, named Danny. My parents had taken a stillborn twin, a vanished older son, and a surviving baby, and they had pressed them all into one continuous boy so that the family could keep breathing. On paper, there had only ever been one Danny. In the wall, behind the drywall, were the seams. I understood the grief of it. I understood, even, the logic of it, that this was a family so shattered by loss that they had performed a kind of merciful fiction and lived inside it, and I was the fiction's beneficiary, raised whole and loved, and never told that I was a mosaic. It was the saddest thing I had ever encountered, and it was, still, a human thing. Grief does terrible arithmetic. That was the explanation, and I clung to it, because the alternative was the man with the face like the fence, and I do not believe in that. I have never believed in that. I refuse. I called Rachel that night. I told her everything. The tapes, the certificates, the twin, the stillbirth, the vanished older brother she remembered as me. I laid it out like a claim, in order, with the documents. I expected her to break. I expected her to fall apart at the discovery that the family had been living a fiction. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said something that took the floor out from under me. Danny, she said, there was no older brother. Rachel, I have the newspaper. July 1994. A 7-year-old named Daniel Ray went missing from our backyard. I have the photo. The dark-haired boy. The one on the tape. I remember the tape, she said. I remember him, but he wasn't older. Danny, I don't. Her voice was doing something I'd never heard it do, a kind of grinding, like a machine trying to turn against its gears. I remember one brother, one Danny. He had dark hair and then she stopped. He had dark hair and then he had light hair. He was 7 and then he was a baby and then he was... I can't. Why can't I? Every time I try to line it up, it slides. Why does it slide, Danny? I was 11. I should remember. Why can't I remember the order? I heard her start to cry, and it wasn't the crying of grief. It was the crying of someone whose own memory had just come apart in her hands like wet paper. Someone who had lived 43 years with a story that had felt seamless until this exact moment, when her little brother read her the documents, and the seam appeared and would not close again. She had held the fiction so well because she had never once looked directly at it. None of us had. That's how the fiction survived. You don't examine the child you love. You just love him, in whatever shape he comes. And now, I'd made her look. I'm sorry, I kept saying. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Don't come here, she said suddenly. Danny, don't come to Oregon. I need to not look at you right now. I'm sorry. I love you. I can't look at you right now. And she hung up, and she did not answer when I called back. And she has not, in the time since, fully answered again. I want to tell you I stopped there. A sane man stops there. He accepts the tragic story, a family that lost too much and rebuilt reality to survive it. And he grieves, and he goes to therapy, and he lets the dead rest. But I am not built to stop when a file is open. I had one thread left, the one I'd been avoiding, because it led to the only door I'd been afraid to open since I was old enough to be angry. My father, Thomas Ray, who left in 1998, the same year the records were forged, and who I had believed my whole life had abandoned us, and who had, I now understood, made 12 cassette tapes in the dark and sealed them in a wall. He'd be old now, if he was alive. I'd never tried to find him. I found him in an afternoon, which is its own kind of grief. A man that easy to find, that I'd chosen for 20 years not to look for. He was in a memory care facility outside Dayton, early onset dementia, advancing. I called, and a nurse told me he had good days and bad days, and that visitors were welcome, that he didn't get many, that he'd like it. I drove there the next morning with the shoebox of cassettes on the seat beside me, though I don't know what I thought he'd do with them. He was small in the chair by the window. The moustache was gone. He was 70 and looked older, and when I said, "Dad, it's Daniel," his eyes moved over my face without landing, the way you look at a stranger who might be someone. I sat down. I didn't know how to start, so I started with the tapes. I told him I'd found them. The cassettes in the wall. Something changed in his face. Not recognition of me, recognition of the thing. "You weren't supposed to find those," he said, and his voice was suddenly clear, the way I'm told it can be, the past coming through when the present won't. I sealed it up. I sealed all of it up so it couldn't get out. So what couldn't get out, Dad? He looked at the window, at the parking lot, or past it. "We got him back," he said. "That's what nobody understands. Everybody thinks we lost Danny. We didn't lose him. He came back." His hands worked at the blanket in his lap. 2 months later, Carol was pregnant, due any day, and one night Danny he was in his bed, in the morning, in his bed like he'd never been gone, 7 years old, same clothes, red shorts, his eyes filled, but he was cold, not sick cold, cold like the ground, and he didn't blink right, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm supposed to be here now," and Carol was so happy she wouldn't hear anything else. Her boy came home, that's all she'd say. Her boy came home. I told myself, dementia. I told myself, a broken mind, decades of guilt, a story built to survive an unbearable loss, now rotting into fantasy. That is the logical explanation. I held on to it with everything I had. And then the babies came, my father said. 2 of them, twins, and one was born dead, and one was born living, and the living one, he stopped. His mouth trembled. The living one had dark hair, and the boy who came back, the 7-year-old, that same night, we put him to bed, and in the morning his bed was empty, and the light-haired baby was gone from the crib, and the dark-haired baby was in the crib in his place. One boy. There was only ever one boy after that. He kept. My father made a folding gesture with his hands, one over the other, over and over. He kept moving. Every few years he'd be a different one of them. The 7-year-old, the baby, the dead one sometimes. I'd swear the dead one, cold in the crib and then warm again by morning, like he couldn't decide which of them to be, like he was trying them on. He looked at me, and for 1 second his eyes landed. They truly landed, and he said, "Which one are you today?" I couldn't speak. "He's not bad," my father whispered. That's the thing I could never make anybody understand. He's not bad. He just wanted to stay. The man at the fence let him come back, but he could only bring back what he was. And what he was all 3 of them at once, and none of them all the way. So he takes turns. He didn't mean to make us crazy. He just wanted a family. He just wanted to stay so bad. Tears ran into the lines of his face. I loved him. All of him. That's why I couldn't leave. Not really. Everybody thinks I left. I didn't leave. I just couldn't be in the house at night anymore. I couldn't sleep in a house where my son might be a different son by morning. So I put the tapes in the wall, and I got a room in town, and I came back every day for years. Every day. I never left him. I never left you. His hand found mine, and it was very cold, and he said, "You feel warm today. That's good. That's a good day." On the warm days I let myself believe you're just my boy. I drove home, and I do not remember the drive. Here is what I have. I have documents. I have a forged birth certificate and a real one. And the real one says twin, sibling deceased, born 1994. And that is fact. I have verified it. The state agrees. I have a newspaper from 1994 that says a 7-year-old named Daniel Ray vanished. And that is fact. It is on microfilm. Marjorie helped me print it. I have 12 cassette tapes of my father's voice, deteriorating in real time across 3 years, describing a child who was 3 children. I have a sister who can no longer hold the story together and can no longer look at me. I have a dream I've had my whole life about a man with a face like a fence. A dream I described out loud at 3 years old according to a tape recorded before I could have understood the words. And I have the logical explanation, which I have built and rebuilt 100 times, and which covers almost everything. My parents lost a son. My mother had twins. One died. Drowning in grief, they merged 3 boys into one, on paper and in the telling, and raised me inside that merged fiction. And my father, unable to bear the house, half left, and told himself a supernatural story to survive his own choices. And that story infected my sister's memory and my dreams, because families are echo chambers, and grief is contagious. Every single strange fact has a mundane cause. I believe that. I have to believe that. It is the only thing standing between me and the other door. But there is one fact the logical explanation does not cover, and I have not told anyone. And I am telling you now only because I have to tell someone, or I will come apart the way Rachel did. Last week I went back to the house on Delmore Street one final time, to hand the keys to the estate agent. And while I was there I walked out to the backyard, to the corner by the maple, to the fence, the exact spot, and I don't know why I did it. I just wanted to stand where the first Danny stood, and I looked at the chain link, at the diamonds of wire, at the way the light came through them, and I understood standing there why the dream never scared me the way it should. Why I always felt, at the fence, not fear, but a kind of homesickness. Because the man on the other side, the patient one, the one with the face like the fence who has been waiting my whole life for me to come through, I have always known, on some level below thought, that he is not a stranger. He is the light-haired baby, the one who was born living and vanished from the crib the same night the boy who came back went to bed for the last time. My father thought the creature took turns being all 3 of us, but there were only ever 2 children in that crib, and only one of them stayed, and it was not the one born to stay. The one who stayed took the dark hair and the birthday cake and the fireproof box and the whole long ordinary life. And the other one, the real one, the light-haired baby who was supposed to grow up as Daniel James Ray, he's still at the fence. waiting for his turn to come back, and lately, in the mirror, in a certain light, at the temples where the grey comes in, I have started to notice that my hair, which has been sandy brown my whole remembered life, is coming in lighter at the roots, pale, almost white. The colour it was in no photograph I have ever seen of myself, because there are no photographs of me as a baby, only of him, the dark-haired one, the one who took my place. I think it's my turn. I think he's tired, after all these years of being 3 boys at once, and I think he's letting go, and I think the family he wanted so badly is finally going to be mine. And the terrible thing, the thing I can't say to Rachel or to anyone, the thing that makes me understand my father completely now, is that when I stand at the fence in the dream lately, I don't wake up before I reach it anymore. I've started reaching through, and the hand on the other side is warm. That concludes tonight's file. If you've ever experienced something strange or unexplained, I'd love to hear your story. You can share it in the comments, or send it to the email in the description. It might become a future case on Midnight Files. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and join me for more documentary-style horror stories. Until next time, stay curious. And remember, sometimes the things we can't explain are the ones we never forget.